everyone, this is Sofia Smallstorm. I'm doing another podcast for you. It's now almost mid-June, very cold in Southern California. I'm dressed in scarves and fleece and flannel pants, and it's ridiculous, but we know about geoengineering and weather modification. And I have with me today a guest that I met a few years ago on the internet. He is a person who is decoding an aspect of 9/11 that is really brilliant. And he has progressed with this quite deeply. I was very impressed. I came across a video he did on the internet, and I contacted him to give him my support and admiration, you could say. And he has always remained very lucid, very calm, very together in very amazing ways. And his name is Steve Deak. I know that some people have heard of him. I want to introduce him right now. Steve.
Hello. Hi, Sophia. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're very welcome, Steve, and it is my pleasure. And I want to see where we can go with this show, because you've really been up and down everywhere on a roller coaster with this project of yours called 9/11 Crash Test. So do you want to start and just tell people whatever you need to tell them from the beginning so that we can get this out there?
Well, it all goes back to, well, first of all, there's a lot of things I want to say, and I can never really formulate my thoughts on a call. I usually get nervous when I get on a phone call, but I have been in the 9/11 Truth Movement for about 10 years now. I began with joining Jim Fetzer's Scholars for 9/11 Truth. Now, I'm no scholar, so I like to joke around with them. But when I sent an email to Fetzer and Jones asking to join them, I told them I wasn't a scholar, but I was so interested in their work that I would be willing to sweep the parking lot for them. And so I became an associate member of the Scholars for 9/11 Truth. But throughout bouncing from one camp to another within the 9/11 Truth movement, I could never find an answer that fit all the evidence. To me, it was very discouraging. And when I witnessed Jim Fetzer and Stephen Jones, disintegrate and have that messy intellectual divorce, and basically forced us to choose sides. It was my first realization that maybe the 9/11 Truth movement isn't there to release the truth. They may be there to cover it up. And after studying all of the camps I could get my hands on, from Judy Wood, I bought it all, Sophia. I've bought the T-shirt for just about every one of them. Each and every time being convinced that this was the truth. Each and every time going to my friends and family and saying, "This is it. I've got it." Well, you only get one chance to make a good first impression. And so over the years, I realized none of it's the truth, and none of it's really getting anywhere closer to the truth. And after 15 years, folks, that should be pretty obvious. So I thought, there's so much money being raised by the truth movement right now with the architects and engineers and with, all of the other attention being given to it. It would be so easy to prove it one way or the other with a little rocket sled test center time. And this all came to me after watching some Mythbusters videos where they cut a car in half and crush a car. I don't know about you, but I love the Mythbusters show. And because I've kind of been doing that ever since I was a kid, blowing stuff up and seeing how things work. So anyway, this test is very inexpensive and could be easy to do, and really doesn't even need to occur. All we have to do is envision it, and people will know that what will happen. And I'll explain what the test is. We would take a wing section from a real 767 that we would purchase from a scrapyard in one of the numerous aircraft graveyards in the desert, and we would go to the Energetic Materials Research and Testing Center in New Mexico Tech, and basically mount a wing section to a rocket sled, like a shark's fin, like a dorsal fin of a shark, and take and construct or fabricate a wall panel section to the specifications of the World Trade Center. And, the wing would be vertical, so the wall panel would be horizontal to duplicate what we saw on television on 9/11. And we would collide them together at 550 miles per hour. and we would film it all with high-speed cameras, and everything would be transparent. The fabrication phase would be transparent. Anybody can inspect the wing section before we collide them, and it would be accurate. It would duplicate what we saw on television, which was even the wingtips sliding effortlessly into the towers.
Okay, so let me stop you for a minute. So you had this brainwave, and you pictured this test because you've watched Mythbusters, and you are a guy who likes to analyze things, at least in your mind, and have a firm understanding of the material science and the physics of what you just saw.
Yeah, I don't think it's possible. Not in the least. I think that it's, and this is what I think is the smoking gun of 9/11. It's not Building 7. It's not all the other things that the truth movement is pointing us to. It's the fact that the planes couldn't cut through the steel columns. There's no way. And all of these other petitions and the court cases that some folks have raised to have a new investigation, that's exactly like turning to the Nazis to investigate the Reichstag fire. We're not going to get an investigation out of these. These people aren't going to investigate themselves.
Exactly. So wait, Steve, again, I just like to proceed bit by bit like a snail.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You're saying that this thing isn't possible, this feat isn't possible to replicate because it didn't happen in the first place. So what do you envision happening with, if you could get the wing, if you could mount it on the sled thing, if you could accelerate to 550 miles an hour, and if you could have built the section of the Twin Towers, and this would fail, and you film it, and then you put it on YouTube, and it goes viral, and then what?
Well, I would think that people would start understanding what we're up against here. That it's you know how it feels to, I would assume you know how it feels to realize that everything you thought you knew in life is untrue, or a good portion of it. And so it's just a revolution of awareness I'm reaching for here. I'm not searching for a new investigation, because obviously the institutions that would control such an investigation are already under control. And that's why, I feel like I'm one of the best kept secrets within the 9/11 truth movement. You will not find anybody linking to me. And I believe that's because the entire truth movement was begun by the perpetrators and is pretty much run by it and filled with people who are duped by the leaders of the truth movement.
So where is it that the support you have asked for or intended to get from the truth movement has not materialized? These people, the people you contacted with this idea, what was the reception you got when you pitched what's a very sensible idea to them? Let's put aside that you need money to build the steel section, and you need money to buy the wing, and you need to get the permission of whatever agency it was or place that you wanted to go to. Let's just put all that aside right now.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, I reached out to everybody. The only people who really were receptive to it were Jim Fetzer, Morgan Reynolds, and was Rosalie Grable, rest in peace, who they originally endorsed it, but over time, my relationship has deteriorated with Jim Fetzer for reasons we can discuss later. And I think Morgan Reynolds is probably receiving a lot of flack from the Judy Wood camp to stop supporting me. But all of these things, all of the support just kind of went away. And so the whole idea also was to kind of embarrass the truth movement into actually doing something. Because, there's so much money they're bringing in. This would be a very cheap demonstration that could, galvanize the whole truth movement. Okay, one of the biggest divisive points within the truth movement is the whole no planes argument. And that's, the architects and engineers will not, reconcile that rift. But they could do it easily by conducting a test like this, because if they really believed what they were saying, that the jets did what we saw on television, then the easiest way to get rid of the no planers is to perform a test like this that will prove that the wing could slice right through the steel.
Okay,
right?
So you're saying that the 9/11 truth movement has brought in a lot of money, but you're really talking about architects and engineers, because they're the ones who have got the biggest funding over the stretch of time that people have been interested in 9/11. And yet they have closed the door on you repeatedly. Do you want to tell us a little bit of that history?
Yeah, well, the whole idea, they could fund this out of pocket. Well, I had some conversations, I think, of folks I may have met through you, I can't recall, but they were involved in the finances for architects and engineers, and they were publicly complaining about how much money is raised with I think the number was almost $500,000 annually, and this was before Gage was on CNN, so I imagine it's gone way up over that now. But yeah, they could pay for a stunt like this out of pocket. And if the whole idea is to reach the mainstream, the slumbering masses, our slumbering neighbors in the mainstream, then what better way than to have a big ass explosion, in the spirit of Mythbusters to do it? Everybody would love it. Even the true believers would want to see this. I've received it from all sides. If you go public with this, yeah, you'll reach your funding. Well, I have gone public with it, and I've raised $155 in about 6 days. And yeah, it is what I call the best kept secret of the truth movement. The truth movement could solve these problems tomorrow. We've seen Saudi Arabia complain about the U.S. and the U.S. complain about Saudi Arabia with their 28 pages. Well, if the Saudis wanted to prove something, they could do it easily with just a little bit of rocket sled center time. It's easy to do. I like to say it's not rocket science.
Exactly.
This is a demonstration of how huge this conspiracy really is.
Well, all right. Again, we have to just go step by step here.
I'm
so
sorry.
The architects and engineers did not respond to you. They were not interested, even though they wouldn't even have to raise money. They have the money to do this, and they did not express any interest in conducting this test.
I received some interest from a few of the lower level folks on their website. Enough interest to pass it along to upper level folks who immediately shot it down and would not link to me. I mean, I wasn't even asking for money. I just wanted some notoriety, some solidarity amongst the truth movement.
What were you told without mentioning who said what were you told in the negation and the refusal?
Oh, that there is no reason to reconcile, that the architects and engineers have no interest in having anything to do with the no-planers, that it's because of the no-planers that the truth movement cannot be taken seriously, that no-planers are either too stupid to be concerned with or are spies.
Okay, so they focused on the no-planers, but you're not really setting out to prove that the no-planers are right or wrong. You're looking at an analysis of physical properties of the materials involved and the speeds in the story that people were sold on television. That's really what you're looking at here.
Yes. And I have engineers who are waiting in the wings in an engineering firm, waiting in the wings to produce the finite element analysis of what we expect this collision how these two bodies we expect to behave.
So tell us a little bit about the FEA, finite element analysis, what it is and why it's necessary to have one before you reproduce the test or the event.
Well, it is a detailed analysis of how we expect these two bodies to behave when they are collided at 550 miles per hour. These are the kind of analyses that are done to recreate crashes, automobile crashes, or materials, structural properties. If they're building a wrench, they want to know where the wrench is going to fail. So they will calculate through extensive computer modeling, knowing the physical properties of the materials they're using and the way these materials are constructed, where this tool or object will be most likely to fail.
Okay, so a computer model is part of the FEA then?
Yes, absolutely. These are huge tasks. To have a finite element analysis created requires a lot of computing power, a lot of engineering power, a lot of time, and money. And I've received quotes from shady engineering firms online who I wouldn't probably give my money to, but from $10,000. But I've gone to actual firms like in Portland, Oregon that have storefronts that are engineering firms that do this sort of crash finite element analysis. That's all they do. And I was able to get, like I said, the first leg of the journey is fine. The people who are answering the phones are really interested in the project. Oh yeah, that's what we do. We would totally be into that. And then you get up to the directors of the business who are, who then get into the mix, and they say, no, for political reasons, we can't do this test. They're afraid of the political ramifications.
Okay, so let's stop there and talk about that. So you've actually found engineering firms, more than one, who would be willing to do the FEA for you, but their higher-ups put the kibosh on the project.
Well, yeah, the whole thing is a thought experiment. The whole way. If they thought that we were going to prove the official story was right, why wouldn't they take some crackpot's money, right? The only reason that they would not conduct this test and take my money, it's just another job to them, is because they know what the results will be.
Do they know, Steve, or are they simply fearful of what the results could be?
Well, I think that the engineers that I've been working with, physicists and engineers, and I do have a firm that has, I'm not going to say where they are, but they have agreed to produce the finite element analysis for us for a song, basically the cost of their computing power. They all agree that no competent engineer would argue that a plane wing could cut through the steel. No way, no how. And I think that's why the architects and engineers like to focus on building 7, because this is controlled opposition. Sorry, folks, but this is what it looks like.
So the FEA, in any competent engineer's mind, if he gave it more than 30 seconds thought or even less, which they don't do because they're all ignoring it. How many engineers are in America? There must be tons of them. So
right.
They're not even thinking about it. The people who signed the A&E petition, I don't know how much thought they've given to this aspect of it, because the 9/11 movement is always talking about other things. So you are the first person who has said, let's look at those cutouts. Let's look at those holes.
Yeah, that blew me away too, right there. After 10 years, I started looking into it maybe 6 years ago, and nobody else was doing it. I thought, what the heck? This is step 1 of any criminal investigation. And, again, that's another clue that perhaps the truth movement isn't interested in getting the truth out there. They're interested in making it look like they are and keeping all the activists busy in a safe sandbox to play in. But really, they're not getting anywhere. Look at the last 15 years. Nowhere. They're still infighting. It's still people talking about planes as if it's possible.
So, Steve, can I just jump into the ozone and ask you here if you have a theory as to how those holes were made?
Oh, sure. And I think I can prove it as well with the rocket sled test center time. The key is to look at the left side of both of the impact holes to both towers, the North Tower and the South Tower, and just count the first 9 columns from the left and compare the damage to both of those sections, first 9 columns. You will see on the North Tower a piece of aluminum cladding that is pinched, like somebody whacked it with a stick. Okay, it's not hit so hard that it would sever the aluminum cladding. It just pinched it. You can see it quite clearly. Right there, that is evidence of a physical impact from something very small, only a couple inches wide and not very dense, because it wasn't so hard and dense that it could bend the steel behind the aluminum. If you look at the South Tower, you'll see that the aluminum there as well is scored. It's not pinched, but it's scored. But again, not very big and not very dense because it didn't damage the steel behind it. As you move to the right, you will see that whatever it was that hit became more dense, and it was a trajectory that was taking it deeper into the tower. So figure a small projectile, almost parallel to the columns, striking from the side. Well, if you think about it, if you're going to try to hit a bunch of parallel sticks, the best way to do it is to strike them from the side. Otherwise, if you're shooting like a bullet at a bunch of sticks that are lined up in a row, if you did it perpendicularly, you'd at best hit one stick. But if you go from the side, you can hit all sticks by shooting them from the side. So any competent missile jock would target all of these columns from the side. And that's what the evidence appears to show. You have a dented aluminum cladding, which is where the damage begins on the very left of both columns, of both towers. Dented and damaged aluminum cladding, followed by progressively worse steel damage until it's sharply bent to the right. Steel columns sharply bent to the right. And then you can see that whatever it was that hit it was deflected either in front or behind the columns. These are missile damage. This is missile damage. They fired missiles.
So the evidence by any good visual analysis, even without a physical analysis, knowledge of how to do physics and engineering, shows that these things were hit. Because everything you said makes complete sense to me. Yes, no sense hitting a bunch of fence, whatever they call them. I used to know the word, I think it begins with P.
Pickets, yeah.
Pickets. Because one will fall. So hit them from the side and you'll knock them all down in a section. So great. Yep. That's very, very good. And for me, you would get many gold stars just for that. So what do the truth movement biggies say when you even have you ever given any of them this much?
Oh, yeah. If you go to my blog, yankee451.info, I've got a post called A Slice of Life from the 9/11 Truth Movement, and where I have had in-depth email conversations with all of them, Sophia, every one of them. Bolin, Fetzer, Judy Wood, David Griscom, Morgan Reynolds, you name them, they're in there. And the fastest way to shut down the conversation is to talk about this damage. They will not respond. It's like I just farted in an elevator. I don't know how else to say it. It's just like everybody scatters, like turning on the lights and the cockroaches just disappear. Every single time. Doesn't matter who it is. As soon as I bring up the lateral bends to the steel visible on the left sides of both towers, everybody disappears. So to me, what I'm looking at here is, now I know I'm not a part of the controlled opposition. I didn't want to be a truth activist. I wanted to live my life examining my navel just like everybody else. But when I saw 9/11 happen, I realized I don't want to leave my grandchildren a world like this. I got to go out knowing at least I tried to do something. So I figured that if the truth movement is really interested in the truth, then they would be embracing me. But if they weren't, and they were fully controlled, then the last thing they would do would be to embrace the truth. In fact, if they are controlled, they will avoid the truth.
All right, yes. And it seems very strange that so many people would have the exact same response. So either it's a human response, or it's it's an order. It's part of the directive that's given to them, I guess you could say, right? Because, when you tell people about 9/11 or any of these deceptions, the tendency is at first to be shocked. There's like a recipe for the reaction. And so either they're having that reaction because it's normal and natural, or there's something else happening.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of both, actually. I think the rank and file, just like me, I would be sure that everything I just learned was the truth, and I was sure I was right at the top of my lungs. So I've seen my own behavior in everyone else, too. But I think a lot of it is from the top down, that there is a lot of control from the leaders of the truth movement. I don't think everybody is, but I think a lot of them may just be indoctrinated professors, who've lived their whole lives supporting the system. And so they can only think outside of the box to a certain extent before their defenses shut down. I think a lot of this is psychological at all levels.
So what are you going to do?
I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I don't know what else to do, Sophia. I don't think we're going to raise the money to be able to get the finite element analysis, for example. I think that the media, because, for example, we've got this new guy, Paul Salo. He's got his test 9/11 Redux. He plans on buying a jet and crashing it into some building. And the mainstream media has just grabbed this and run with it. And so I have reached out to a lot of the authors of these articles, the journalists who wrote about him, and said, hey, how about a follow-up about another crash test project that's been going on for years? Not a response, nothing. And I can't get anybody within the truth movement to share anything about the 9/11 crash test project except for the good people at Let's Roll forums. And Truth or Musical. Truth or Musical is a gal, I don't even know her name, JT is what I call her. She's a satirist, Muslim ex-journalist who satires the 9/11 truth movement. These are the only people that'll give me the time of day. And like I said, I'm not controlled, but everywhere I go, I am accused of being, I was just accused yesterday of being dark money, whatever that is. It's like I have spent my own money on this stuff, haven't taken a dime from anybody until last week when we started our own our own fundraiser to try to raise the $35,000, and we got $155, like I said. And so I think that what's going on is that we are too real for the truth movement. They would be into a stunt like Paul Salo's where you could crash a plane into it, but that which will leave enough questions so that nothing's going to be resolved. But if we do something like mine, where I get an engineering firm, a physicist, and an engineer to back me up, get a finite element analysis, and rent a rocket sled test center to prove or disprove the hypothesis, that's pretty scary to the people who are trying to prevent the truth.
So there are two things I want to say. One is you have to tell us more about this other guy, this Paul Salo, but let's save that for a minute. Do you think that the, let's just call them the biggies in the truth movement, are believing that you'll never get anywhere, you'll never be able to perform this test? You have now mentioned that it is going to take some $35,000 to do the FEA. So that, if you achieve that and you get the computer model done and the predictions on paper in terms of mathematical formulas and so forth, then your next step would be to try to get the plane wing, build the section, and you'd need more money for that. Then you'd have to run the test. So are the biggies saying, whether it's to themselves or to you, it's not doable?
Well, they try to, but I think that what they're doing is just plain ignoring it. They prefer not to even discuss it, because if the rank and file and, say, the architects and engineer got a hold of it, I think they'd be all over it, because why not just pay for this right now? And the $35,000 would be to actually buy a jet wing and go to, because the finite element analysis itself will be about $4,000, which is a song for this sort of work. We do have a very sympathetic firm that's willing to give us a break on it. So the plan is to buy a jet wing, which would be about $15,000 to $20,000, and then travel to one of these graveyards to dismantle it. Spend a few days there with a team of engineers and me crawling inside a jet wing, and we record all of that on video. Right there would be a great publicity stunt as well, because nobody in the truth movement backs up their hype or their tripe with physics, with the actual numbers, okay, and a demonstration that can prove it or disprove it. Sure, I start the project with the premise of saying I don't think it's possible, and I don't, and I think I can prove it. But I've been wrong about a lot of things before, and I've had to eat crow before, and I've done it publicly. That's another thing I don't see the truth movement doing ever, is admit they're wrong. They will dig in their heels and ban you or not talk to you rather than admit they're wrong. Well, that's not truth. That's not being a truth seeker. To me, that is just textbook controlled opposition.
So you need $4,000 for the FEA. That's not a lot of money. And
no, but
we're going to link your website. Wait, I'm just taking this step by step. We're going to link your website.
I got to learn to shut up. Yeah, go ahead.
We're going to link your website, and you have ways to donate there, right?
Yeah, we have a fundraiser on Fundly, Fundly. And I have links to it on the crash test site. We have 911crashtest.com. You can go to yankee451.com or .info. And we're on Facebook, too, as 911 Crash Test on Facebook.
So 4,000 is the starter goal, and then you'll get the FEA.
Well, no, 35 is the starter goal, because the Boeing specifications, we want this to be as accurate as possible. And, these are proprietary specifications that you're just not going to get from Boeing or anybody who works for them. So we're going to just take the pertinent measurements ourselves. We have to buy the wing first to do that so we can dismantle it. And then we'd probably just sell it back as scrap to the aircraft graveyard. Once we have the specs, then we will be able to go to get the finite element analysis. Because the specs for the World Trade Center's wall columns at the point of impact, that's all in the public domain. So once we get these specifications nailed down, then the engineers will have to create models of these two impacting bodies, accurate models using the accurate materials used in each one. And we would post this online so that everybody could go over our figures and that any skeptics would be able to complain and make any suggestions. And if, we make mistakes, so we would want to have those corrected. Once we have those two models created, then we would go to the engineering firm and they would create the finite element analysis. So the $35,000 is going to cover travel, lodging, food for us while we're collecting these specifications, as well as the materials or the modeling involved of these two bodies, as well as the finite element analysis. So that's why the $35,000 for the first phase of the project. Once we get the model done, I doubt we will get a test, but the idea is to then force a crash test center to either approve or deny the test. So I would go there personally with our finite element analysis, which explains what we want to do with our test, how we expect it to behave, and these are our physics calculations to explain why we came to these conclusions. Okay, now think of Michael Moore, right? He's gone to go embarrass Charlton Heston. That's the whole idea of this, is to go to a test center where they have already allowed Mythbusters to do some fluffy experiment of cutting a car in half and give them an experiment equally just as important or more so, or just as easy anyway, where we're going to recreate the same test, only replace their steel plow with a wing and replace their car with some wall columns built to the specifications of the World Trade Center. If they would allow Mythbusters to cut a car in half, why wouldn't they allow us to conduct this test? So it's really the whole way it's a publicity stunt. I expect the answer to be no, but even that would be a victory.
Okay, Steve, so what if right at the beginning nobody lets you buy an airplane wing from them? Because those airplane, waste sites, they're linked to somebody big, because airplanes are a major craft. And if you want to buy a Boeing 767 or 757 wing, you're going to have to buy it from them. And what if they're told, no, don't sell anybody a wing, least of all somebody called Steve Deak or one of his henchmen?
Yeah. Well, that's how I had to get the price, actually, was to tell them I wanted to buy a wing to roof my house with it. There are ways to get in there and get the measurements, and not everybody works for the man. And there are a lot of people who would really like to see this happen, because a lot of people think I'm wrong and want to see me prove myself wrong. I'm all for that. If I proved myself wrong, I would be actually pretty happy about that, because I'd go back to having a real life again. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think that the finite element analysis will make it very clear what's going to happen with our test. And so I think the results will be that the crash test centers would rather face the embarrassment of denying a test that could prove the war on terror is a fraud, and face the embarrassment of denying a peace project, rather than face the embarrassment of proving the war on terror is a fraud. I think it goes without saying that they will decline the test, and we'll crow about that from the top of our lungs, too.
Well, it sounds like a great plan, I have to say, and I'm sorry that so many people have shut the door on you or scattered, run off. I haven't.
No, you haven't. I really appreciate it. And you almost got it funded single-handedly. I got to thank you for that. I was blown away by that. And I also want to say that I read your newsletter. Thank you for that. You write so well. I wish I had your gift. But it does touch on, I know you and I have our disagreements about a lot of things, but it is interesting when your topic is very close to my interest in 9/11, because the architect of the World Trade Center, Minoru Yamasaki, had deep ties to the defense industry, and was saved from Japanese internment in World War II, or American internment in Japanese internment camps, by a architectural firm in, I think, Chicago called Smith, Hinchman, and Grills. And Smith, Hinchman, and Grills was later involved in the Manhattan project's site selection process, and they actually went on to build the CIA headquarters. So this Japanese American who was a nobody architect was spared internment in World War II by a competitor architectural firm, Smith, Hinchman, and Grills. He didn't even work for him. And he was allowed to move to New York City, and then he was later employed by this Smith, Hinchman, and Grills during the time when they were making selections for the Manhattan Project. And then this firm went on to build the CIA headquarters. You think this guy had ties to the military-industrial complex?
No, that is very interesting, Steve. I'm wondering, why did they select him? What did he offer that they couldn't find in somebody else?
Oh, well, he was manipulative, for one. He was easy to manipulate. His parents were. He lived actually in Skid Row, the the neighborhood that birthed the term Skid Row in Seattle. This is in the heart of the internment, the Japanese internment. Seattle was big time. They were locking whole families in cages. Basically they were just forcing them out. If you could get out of town, please leave or we're going to lock you up. But of course, nobody east of Seattle wanted them. And so it is interesting that Yamasaki, out of nowhere, was spared internment because he didn't even work for Smith, Hinchman, and Grills until after the war and after the internments had ended. So I wrote an article about it. I could link to you about it. It's just fascinating stuff because it really looks like they built the World Trade Center to be destroyed, that the whole idea was a 30-year plan.
Well, I tend to agree with that, and I've made comments on one recent interview that I did. It just hit me in the middle of the interview that the whole point of this was erection and then destruction.
Yep.
And for what reasons, I'm not quite sure, but the pomp and attention that was brought to those buildings, the fact that they were not World Trade Centers by any means, they were just kind of like monoliths that represented something, world trade perhaps. The whole thing is fishy. It's just one huge fishy chapter of American history.
Oh, it's fascinating. When you go back to the beginning and 30 years ago, when you look at the conception of it, the politics of what was going on at the time. I mean, these are the guys that had the world by the balls after they just kicked the Nazis' asses. They thought they could do anything. They were just ramping up the moon launches at this time. I mean, they were full of chutzpah. That's all they had. And so they look at the size of those towers, outsized effigies of America itself, right? They were marketed heavily from the beginning as synonymous with America. Bullshit. They were synonymous with international, multinational corporations, and that sort of thing. Nothing to do with America. They were marketed that way from the beginning, as if to set them up for, their destruction. And when you look at the history of the Port Authority, it's just like reading about organized crime. And you look at the company that actually got the contract to pour the 10 million square feet of concrete for the World Trade Center. That is fascinating right there, Sophia. These guys, the Pope family from New Jersey, the Popes, look them up. They are the wealthiest Italian-American immigrants in the history of Italian-American immigrants. Direct ties to the CIA and the mafia and the media, but I repeat myself. They brought us the National Enquirer. The Pope family, they are the concrete contractors who poured the 10 million square feet for the World Trade Center complex. But dig this, their firm is called Colonial Sand and Gravel. Colonial, you think, all right, the triangle hats and stuff. Well, their trucks are all painted in the colors of the Italian flag. They're so proud. I mean, they supported Mussolini. I mean, it's just amazing to read. These guys, these were part of the elite. They rubbed shoulders with presidents. They went to church with Sinatra. I mean, they had photographs of Fortune Pope with Kennedy the month he was killed. These guys, I mean, Truman, they had they've met with every president since Truman. It's just, well, these weren't your average concrete contractors. Okay, but these are the guys who got the credit for pouring the 10 million square feet of concrete that we all saw turn to dust, but they didn't have any claims of it on their website. They will not, you don't see any pictures of them pouring, the 10 million square feet of concrete. In fact, you can't even see these fleets of concrete trucks painted in the Italian flags going to the World Trade Center. There's no record of the concrete being poured. It is one of the most fascinating stories. That's why I can't put it down. Every time you peel another layer, you meet the popes. You can't make this stuff up.
Well, all right. So tell us about this other guy and why the media has run with his crash test, and what is his crash test about?
Well, all right. I spoke with Paul Salo a while back, a couple weeks ago, because I was infuriated. I was just livid that somebody had done what I was unable to do, because I couldn't break into the mainstream no matter what. But after I thought he was stealing my thunder, and I thought that was unfair. But after a while, I stopped feeling sorry for myself and realized this is really an opportunity, because he's getting the notoriety. I'm not getting any, but it doesn't matter. The crash test is still getting a lot of attention. So I talked to him and I asked him, we're kind of duplicating efforts here. I was trying to see if he might be willing to join forces. Not at all interested. He's not at all a truther. And he says he's never heard of me before. Now, I find that hard to believe, because when I started the crash test project about 4 years ago, I wanted to make sure nobody else was already doing it. So, of course, you're going to Google like crazy to see if anybody else had done this. If he had done the same, which I'm sure he did, then everywhere you look, if you Google anything, plane crash 9/11, plane into a skyscraper, any combination of words, you're going to get 9/11 crash test. So I do think he has seen me, and that he's basically a businessman who saw an opening that I wasn't taking and decided to capitalize on it. I spoke with him, and he is an expatriate out of Thailand who is in the construction industry in some way. I think he's in sourcing of employees, talent sourcing for like architects, engineers, lawyers, that sort of thing, IT guys in Asia. So he knows where all the empty buildings are. He knows a lot of real estate moguls, and I guess he's pretty well off too. So he's a mover and shaker in that sort of shady community over there. So I had to go around in my head too. Is he trying to undermine the project? No, I mean, I was dying all by myself without him. So all he's done is breathe life into the 9/11 truth movement. So when I called him, he said that, go ahead.
But was he doing his thing in order to demonstrate some aspect of 9/11? Was his centered around 9/11? Does he make that plain?
Oh, yeah. He wants to recreate it. He thinks that he's not even talking about the same planes or the same buildings. It's just a stunt, spectacle, and he's trying to make money on it. And he is. He says he's bringing in so much money, he knows he's going to pull this off. And I believe him.
And is he going to use the same plane? No.
No, he's going to use a 747, but I think he'll take whatever he can get, I think. And he knows the governments in China and Asia. I mean, China has whole cities that they've abandoned, right? They move whole cities. They'll build a new one, move the whole city to another location. And they've got these whole empty cities with whole skyscrapers sitting there. And so
he's going to use a steel frame skyscraper.
No,
but what about the duality?
No, it's not going to be the same at all. Nothing even close to the same. And I said, he says, people are saying it's not an apples to apples comparison. I said, well, it isn't. He says, that doesn't matter. And it doesn't. I think he's right. I don't think it matters. And I think at the very least he will prove some stuff. It won't be a valid comparison, and they'll always leave that open to doubters. But, think about it. He will prove whether or not the jet can fly that fast at altitude. All right, that's something. He will prove how difficult it is to hit the building at that speed, if he does get it to that speed at altitude. Okay, what will happen if he clips a wing? Okay, we'll see what happens. If he does manage to hit the building head on, like we saw on television, at the very least he will prove that what crash dynamics look like when a jet hits a building at that speed, or even close to that speed. So he will prove some stuff.
Well, he has to come close to the specs of 9/11. I mean, if he flies his jet at a very low altitude, much, much slower, it's not going to shed any light on the 550 miles an hour that the 9/11 planes are said to have flown at. So if he does this, we're hoping that he's going to at least come close in some respects. But Steve, I get the feeling that somebody he was put up to this in order to obscure your very valid, very validated effort, very precise effort of replication.
Well, that's what I thought at first too. I thought that my paranoia came out, and because I was feeling pretty sorry for myself at first. But when I thought about it, I thought, no, because we've been getting a lot of attention on 9/11 crash tests from all over the world. Because, like I said, he doesn't even have a website. He just has a Facebook page. I think he did see an opening, saw that I wasn't capitalizing on it, and saw that he had some means to pull off a spectacle. In other words, he knew people in China and Thailand who would allow this sort of spectacle. There were buildings all over the place that he could use that they wouldn't mind crashing. If he demolish a building, you clean it up, fine, crash it into it. So I see this for what it is. I don't think that he was. For example, I think the Truth Movement is probably going crazy over this. This is the last thing they would want to see, because I think the Truth Movement was deployed to distract attention from the truth and run out the clock. After 15 years, they were probably hoping it was already over by now. But then Paul Salo shows up, tries to make $1 million, probably is going to do it, and I get all the attention. So I don't think this was planned at all. I think that they're probably twisting themselves into a pretzel trying to figure out how to avoid it. And when I talked to him, he said that I was the only truther that had ever reached out to him. He hasn't heard from anybody, and he thought that was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that is kind of strange. I'm thinking as you're talking, and I don't know that the biggies, I call them the biggies, because I'm separating the Truth Movement, the activists, from the biggies.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't think the biggies maybe even know about this, do they?
Oh, I'm sure they do. I'm sure the Fetzer's mentioned it, but again, I don't think Fetzer. I think Fetzer just doesn't like me. That's why he doesn't have anything to do with me. I don't think he's controlled per se as much as just indoctrinated. But the others, yeah, they will avoid him and me like the plague. I don't know. I do think that he was not planned, because I know I wasn't planned, and he's bringing me a lot of attention. And so that's all I can conclude. So I told him I would. At first, I was frustrated, didn't like him, but I told him I would support him, and I've linked to him, and I try to draw a distinction between his test and mine, but I can't see anything bad with this guy's test. I just can't. I mean, except to show that, yeah, it's not a valid test, and see if I could see people saying it didn't prove anything. Well, yeah, okay, but in the meantime, I get all the attention, so okay.
Well, what if the test, let's say he goes far enough to actually create the test and it's pulled off, and then people say, when your effort is mentioned, if your effort does and hopefully gain momentum, then people say, oh, that was already done and it didn't prove anything.
Well, that's where because even in my video that I don't know if you saw the one I just released, 9/11 Crash Test 2016, I make it very clear that the construction of the towers, the unique construction of the towers, makes the need to crash a whole jet into any old building moot. There's no need for it, because we're going to reproduce the official claims themselves. The NIST makes it very clear that it was the wings, the fuel in the wings, that allowed them to burst through the steel. They even have pictures. We will just recreate their claim.
So, but what about the jet engines being so big and hard and leaden and heavy?
Sure, but remember the picket fence analogy earlier. If a jet engine bursts through, a picket of that fence, it's not going to damage a picket it didn't hit.
Exactly. So it's the combination of the wing loaded with very heavy fuel or amounts of fuel that constituted great weight, plus the turbine engines, right?
Well, no, the engines were not counted, because if you look at the official story says that the wings burst through the steel because of the fuel added to it, creating the mass required to burst through the steel, but they were also disintegrated as they burst through the steel. Everywhere you look, that's the claim. National Institute of Standards and Technology, FEMA, MIT. The wings were fully fragmented as they burst through the steel. So by the time the engines entered the wing or entered the tower, if you think about the wing of the jet being it's swept back, the wings are not perpendicular to the tower, they're swept back about 30 degrees. So that would mean that they would be striking first from the point of connection of the fuselage. So the fuselage would hit first, and they would sequentially strike these columns, one column at a time, one sharp corner at a time, until the engines would penetrate the wall. And by the time the engines penetrated the wall and the wing disintegrated as it did, their own claim, then the wing tips would no longer be attached to the plane. Okay, so there's a good, 50 feet of wing tip or 30 feet of wing tip that just is no longer attached to the plane, no longer has the benefit of the mass or velocity of the whole jet. And yet Purdue University's animation shows the wing tips themselves sliding like butter into the tower. And all of the videos show the wing tips sliding like butter into the tower. It's because of the combination of the construction of the columns as well as the construction of the 30-degree sweep of the wing that makes the whole plane not necessary at all. And in fact, it wouldn't even be a valid test. But it would be a great spectacle and a huge publicity stunt. So more power to him.
All right. Well, that's all very good, and it's refreshing my understanding since it's been many years and I haven't even visited this. But the nose hits first, and there's a whole body of the plane that follows, and then you get to the wings.
Yeah. But like I said, you can see in the pictures, and according to their own claims, that the wings should no longer be attached to the plane, and they pretty much should have just shattered and fallen off.
Fallen onto the street, right?
Yeah, in pieces. Some pieces, the plane didn't behave any differently no matter what part of the building it hit. It's parallel columns, okay? The wing is going to behave differently when it strikes a steel column than when it strikes a window. The part that strikes a window would probably sail right through. The part that hits the column is probably going to bounce off. So it's going to be shredded like a big head of lettuce.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. Now, I just hope you can get farther into this and keep going. And I hope people who are listening will go to your site, see your videos, go to YouTube. And I hope that at least this show will generate some interest. And I'll try to get you on other shows as well, Steve, I promise.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to talk to you about the Manhattan Project sometime, too, because that is fascinating to me.
Well, sure. Not that I know anything or everything about it, but we'll definitely talk. So, please, everyone listening, remember Steve. Steve is very relentless. He is very dedicated, and he comes from the true depth of true self. I can vouch for that because I've known him a while. We've talked about a lot of things, and he has never given up. He has been doing this and funding it on his own. And Steve, you want to tell people what your background is and why you're so interested in what I call it material science and physics and engineering?
Well, I used to sell fireworks as a kid, and I've always been into. I guess I was raised as a normal red-blooded American male, falling out of trees and bicycles and blowing stuff up. I've just always been curious about how things work, but I've also I can't live a lie, and 9/11 has supposedly changed everything, but all I saw it change was the way people lie to themselves. Or I guess it hasn't changed. Maybe my realization of how they lie to themselves has changed. And I literally don't have a background in this, Sophia. It's just common sense. I'm looking at this from a layperson's point of view, and with the perspective of these are not difficult problems to solve, and we can actually demonstrate what the conclusions really are. So I don't know. To me, it's just a matter of being truthful, being honest.
Yeah, and that's what I guess in a way, Steve, people don't have time. They don't have the kind of time in their personal lives, or they don't want to dedicate that kind of time that you've put into this. And I'm just sorry that truthers, people who are really into busting these deceptions, haven't managed to find you. And I'm hoping that they will find you now. I'm hoping that my little drop in the bucket show will actually help you and give you the wind, at least the beginning. You need a little wind, and then your sails fill with it. So I will do my best, because I think this is very worthwhile, even if you're denied a chance to use the test site.
Oh yeah, if we can get the finite element analysis made, that would be no truther has done that. That would be huge, and to have the truth movement continue to ignore it, again, would speak volumes.
Well, I will keep working on it. I have some little ideas. The flames are already igniting. So, all right, Steve, thank you very much. And please help me select the proper links for the show description so that we give people a good tour of your site and your videos and get this part made into part of real history, because this is very important. I think it is. So thank you.
I will.
All right.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Hey everyone, this is Sophia. I want to tell you about iodine, which I've been selling on the website avatarproducts.com. That's my online store. Iodine is a mineral that the body needs pretty much more than any other mineral. Iodine goes to every single cell in your body. It's crucial for reproductive system organs. It's crucial for the thyroid. The thyroid makes 4 hormones. It can't even make them without iodine. And what has happened, we've started to make thyroid hormone out of bromine, fluorine, and chlorine because they resemble iodine so closely as molecules. So we're getting brominated thyroid hormone, chlorinated thyroid hormone, fluoridated thyroid hormone. And those hormones regulate so many different systems in the body. No wonder we're falling behind in our cellular detoxing and housekeeping. So if you visit avatarproducts.com, you're going to see 3 different kinds of iodine. You can get a trial size for only a few dollars, 1/4 ounce. And that's a good place to start. So help yourself and feel better. Reminding you, visit avatarproducts.com, where you'll find a number of things that I have discovered, or I've even designed in some cases, that have solved problems for me. Visit avatarproducts.com.